Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to our Bridge Erie to Harm Reduction Learning Collaborative. My name is Angela Dieter. I am the director of our Office of Harm Reduction within the Erie County Health Department. We're happy that you guys are all here on this beautiful day. Today, for our guest speaker, we have Corey Nieman, who is the director of the Caring Network at Eastern Hills Wesleyan Church and a pastor of Recovery Church on Union Road. He is a recovery coach, trainer of trainer in the CCAR, a biblical counselor, a liaison with the Christian Medical and Dental Association, specifically Embrace Recovery. He has been equipping churches to offer recovery coaching, 12-step groups, MAT clinics, and networking referrals for spiritual social services for the past 15 years. He has worked with the Erie County Overdose Prevention Task Force in the past and has hosted addiction recovery seminars and events at churches and rehab centers all over Western New York. He is also married with 3 children and lives in the Amherst area. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Corey Nieman for his presentation.
Well, hello, everyone. Again, my name is Pastor Corey, newly licensed as of this summer. And so if you don't mind, I'd just like to start off with a little prayer as we pastors do. So I'll just pray for y'all. Lord, I thank you for this time, and I thank you for this coalition that we could come together at such a time as this to be a beacon of light and hope into our communities. There's so much at stake here, Lord. We can't afford to be isolated in this. We are better together. And I'm just praying for every person here and the way that they contribute and be a light into their community, that this would be something that we could rally behind and, again, just cooperate to see people freed from addiction and enter into recovery. In your name we pray. Amen. Well, my department I would couch as spiritual social services here at Eastern Hills. I've been here for over 10 years, but recovery is kind of the cornerstone by which we kind of put all our potential. And so because of that, I've spent, these many years trying to build up a cache, if you will, of referrals and networks and people and places and things so that we can, again, just have warm referrals back and forth between nonprofits and, you all at in the coalition and churches, just to, again, pool all our efforts and not be essentially silos. I would say that my passion is for marriages, but then my calling appears to be, addiction and recovery. And again, we kind of started out just trying to figure out in our zip code what are the top 3 needs that people are kind of struggling with. And what that amounted to was addiction recovery, grief share, and divorce care. And from then on, we've actually been able to expand into things like financial peace and cancer care. We have groups that, meet for caregivers and all sorts of things that we're just constantly trying to provide greater services to the community. But my story of recovery began as being born into a family who essentially on both sides struggled with alcohol. And whether it was my, immediate family or my in-laws, there was so much that kind of wreaked havoc in the lives of those family members. But it started with my dad. He was, we were all Buffalo born and raised, and he came from a pretty broken home. And as a result, I think he saw a lot, and I think he didn't know how to deal with a lot of the things that he saw. And I found out later in life he was actually diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, and he took substances to try to help with that, both legally and otherwise. Um, and what he got later on in life was Parkinson's as a result, I believe, of the nerve medication that he was taking and other things. So it was a rough go for him. But growing up, I too had kind of an addictive personality, and it manifested not so much in alcohol because I had a fear and respect for that, but other substances, um, obviously, sex and just a lot of what I call general hooliganism in terms of just destruction of property or setting fires, or nothing too huge, but just enough to be a thorn in the side of the community in which I lived and in which my cousin lived, which happens to be Amherst and Cheektowaga area. So it I didn't want to deal with that. So going out and, just being reckless was part of my escape. But that all kind of led to, and again, escalated into some run-ins with the law. Um, funny enough, I was stealing makeup for my girlfriend at a Wegmans and got caught. And that's when I first experienced what many, in recovery world have experienced is fighting the law, and the law won, right? Um, well, as a result, the judge had some mercy on me because I was at that, young adult age, not quite to be tried as a full blown adult. But there was a condition that if I wanted a clean record, I had to go to a 12-step group. And, you know, I was confronted with this idea that of the higher power, and that I couldn't do this alone. And I'd love to say I got it right the first time. I certainly didn't. And I had to plead with the judge again to say, hey, I'm an idiot. I realize this, but I want to keep working these steps, and I want to fully engage the higher power in this because I don't think I can do this on my own. And the higher power is ubiquitous in all recovery. And in fact, I later found out that AA was scripture straight out of the Bible. And so, um, after I kind of cleared that all up, I said, Dad, I think I want to become a counselor. And he said, no, son, you don't want the weight of that on your shoulders day after day of kind of dealing with everybody's problems. Well, little did I realize he was going to counseling all his life. So he was speaking out of experience, but also this whole idea that, counseling world, therapy world, even the medical world can sometimes be a little hopeless if there isn't something greater than us that we are willing to, engage and kind of rehabilitate ourselves for, to do the heavy lifting, as it were. And so, in an alternative route, like I didn't go to seminary, I didn't go to necessarily for a counseling degree, but I did get trained in CCAR out of Connecticut, which is something that uh, New York State uses as well. And then shortly thereafter, I became a trainer of trainer. And then I started speaking at different engagements. And we started a 12-step group at our church. And I started writing my own trainings. And I started equipping churches to become the Saints Hospital that we were always supposed to be. Um, and, whether it was, again, just engaging in the fight kind of on a training and equipping level, um, and trying to gain referrals for resources and just be kind of that advocate, to be able to, again, be a broker of or an agent of change and a broker of resources. I started getting this idea that there was something bigger on the horizon, and this is where I caught a vision for Recovery Church. So on the next slide, you'll see that there are a network of recovery churches. It maybe doesn't look as impressive in the zoomed out map, but there's over 100 plus now, and up into Canada as well. And we are one of 3 in the Western New York area, relatively. There's one up in Gasport, one down in Cazenovia. And I didn't know this network existed, but through, people, places, and things, I found out that they, empower and equip people to start these ministries out of storefronts and churches to basically be what's known as kind of a parachurch ministry, which can be a confusing term, but it's basically that you are there for a specific people group to be able to minister to them and only them, and to effectively be a bridge between, people who don't know ministry, again, with my broken road stories. But I wanted to leverage that toward something positive. And so I set out to kind of investigate what these churches and ministries are all about. If you go to the next slide, you'll see a picture of me attending the 1-year anniversary of the Recovery Church in Gasport, New York. Yeah, I'm the tall one in the back right with the cap on. And so I wanted to see what it was all about. I wanted to meet the people. I wanted to get an understanding of what would be required to start a recovery church in our area. And funny enough, the way God works with me sometimes is he gave me a vision for like down to the building, exactly where this thing was supposed to be planted. But again, other than having attended a church planning conference earlier in the year and attending, both Solid Rock up in Gasport and the Recovery Church in Cazenovia Baptist, I had no real idea where this was all heading. I just knew that after hearing the people, in attendance just bare their souls and get prayed for and get next steps and support as to how to engage in a 12-step group, or how to bring their families alongside with them to effectively be ministered to as well. Because I sometimes feel like recovery ministry isolates family members and friends as opposed to uniting them. That might just be a stereotype in my brain, but I at least wanted to be part of just a ministry that united families, and this seemed like a perfect fit. So I just started, if you go to the next slide, thinking about like, if we did nothing but recovery at this, church on, I didn't have a night of the week planned at that point. What would we look to do? And, this acronym has probably been used many times before, but just to be laser focused on recovery. Like, I'm not trying to do kids ministries and, missions ministries and, marriage ministries and all those things, although there are components of that in this. I just wanted to lovingly care for the needs within our for equality, as we all are on the same sinking ship with equal access to the lifeboats, regardless of your station in life. And again, to initiate recovery by employing holistic care, including medicated assisted treatment, coaching, rehab, 12-step groups, Narcan, social services, mental health services, and the church. So, all hands on deck. And obviously, including the hospitals and crisis services and and doctors and nurses and all you folks in the government and the principalities. Like, again, I've been a member of the task force for a while. I was under a different organization at the time, so when that organization folded, it kind of you know taking the best of what we all can offer and putting it toward this idea that recovery is a goal, but transformation is the goal. And I'm not going to start quoting scripture at you, but if you would like to look up that verse, those verses, it'll back up this idea that beneath the addiction there is an iceberg of emotions and problems and conflicts that in the process of recovery, I would say we maybe specialize in helping people go even beyond to transform their very selves. And again, recovery is part of that process. But when we talk about becoming a new person, it is a heavy lift, and that's where I believe God is that antidote to things like relapse and things like maintaining our recovery and things like reuniting families and things like giving us a purpose. Because when you think about all the reasons why someone might become addicted, whether it's nature or nurture or boredom or injury or purposeless living, abuse, neglect, trauma, the list goes on and on. Those are not healed overnight. Now, unfortunately, having addictive personality myself, like, I want results overnight, right? Because I don't want to suffer and I don't want to do the hard work, honestly. But as you know, nothing good comes easy. And, we believe that suffering can be redeemed, that our weakest points can become our greatest strengths if we should submit those over to the higher power who, knows how to transform these things, because man can't cure spiritual problems. So again, we can address the mental, we can address the medical, but when it comes to a person's spirit, and doctors know this, like, in the healing process, that those who have some component of faith usually get speedily recovered, and those who don't, sometimes it takes a lot longer. And again, I don't want to speak in stereotypes, but we've seen enough that when we employ all the weapons in our arsenal against addiction, again, between church and state, if we can't rally behind this, what could we possibly rally behind, right? So if you want to go to the next slide. So Recovery Church at Union Road is where it's at for me. We're basically 4600 Union across from Maryvale Schools. This was the building that I had in mind. There was no one else necessarily in that building, but a Sunday morning church happened to plant as well in that building that we're working in tandem with, called Redeem. And our Friday nights are Recovery Church at Union Road. And we're really right on that border of Amherst and Cheektowaga, which I love because, again, it's about time I give back to that community. But we aim to create a safe space to explore faith and recovery for seekers and new believers with low barriers to entry. So unlike an actual church, we're not going to collect tithe. We're not trying to make members. We're not trying to get political. I have no desire to put up red tape or hoops to jump through, because I'm tired of, that kind of model of church. And this is why I get excited about this, because, the Bible talks about us bearing each other's burdens, and it talks about us stepping out of the dark and into the light. And I think this is a perfect place to do so. And while I wrote this before we actually planted the church, we have actually launched as of a couple of weeks ago, and I'll tell you some of the great things that have happened. But we want to teach biblically out of the 12 steps, and I don't know if you're aware, but you know, in addition to AA, there are groups like Celebrate Recovery and Regeneration and Alcoholics Victorious, and basically it combines the 12-step groups with biblical teaching and mentorship and sharing and giving back to others, because again, if you're familiar with the steps, those are all part of that process. Again, I mentioned the hand in glove relationship between what we offer with the Caring Network at Eastern Hills and this recovery church. So just think of it as Eastern Hills is kind of my day job, and Recovery Church, weirdly enough, is on Friday nights. We're the only one crazy enough to put ministry on a Friday night, but it's been paying off because we want to have an alternative to kind of the party scene. So we want to be a place where families can recover together and not be further divided. However, we do understand that there is good that comes from when, men are with men and women are with women. And so we do plan to, because we haven't quite gotten through a full month yet, but we do plan to have those kind of meetings within the evening, and then, split off to be able to talk about some more intimate things, including we're looking to add a smart group for families of the addicted through a gal named Tommy who works for the state county in endeavoring to again help employ good boundaries and help people not enable their loved ones but help their loved ones. So there are some things that we want to do as offshoots, but again strictly focused on recovery. Go to the next slide. So back to my story, shortly after I was born, my dad had a choice to make. Was he going to stay addicted to alcohol and marijuana? And he was dealing a little bit. I found out at our lake house in Chautauqua, that's where he would split up the bricks to then sell, which I thought was crazy. But because I've eaten many a dinner at that table and played a lot of cards at that table. But anyways, my mom gave him an ultimatum, and basically that was you either find sobriety or you find a new home. And thank God my dad chose to go to a Wesleyan church in Orchard Park and found, his higher power and his sobriety in the same place. And, as I mentioned before, I am in the Wesleyan denomination as well. Not because of that. I had no idea of that until, I don't know, about 5 years ago, because he kept that kind of under wraps, pretty well. But the idea is he broke the chain of drinking in my family line, forever, potentially. I mean, you can always pick it back up and some of us can be predispositioned that way through the family line, but he changed the trajectory of my family. His brothers and sisters, maybe not so lucky. Some of them are still nursing that addiction. Some of them, lost their families because of that addiction. So the results a lot of times are commensurate with how much, how desperate we're going to get to change the path that we're on. And I do get that some of it is just illness and it's maybe never going to rebound. But, even looking at my in-laws family line, like my wife, was a bartender, and some of her cousins have lost eyes in bar fights and, gotten in car crashes where somebody died. And so just all sorts of crazy things. But this is really what kind of inspired me to do something about this, because I often joke, I was in a room full of pastors trying to explain this recovery church thing. And I said, my first order of business, I think, is going to be to start a Buffalo Bills support group, right? Because I used to watch my uncles get high as a kite on Sunday and be drunk as a skunk, into Monday, lamenting the Bills' loss. But actually, I'd start the group for if we actually won, because I think if people didn't know how to cope with that, we'd probably burn down the city. So, yeah, I mean, even our best intentions of celebration can get out of hand, when we don't practice good boundaries. And again, you know, if I'm talking about addiction broadly, I would say it's anything from addicted to social media to substances. So our focus isn't just on drugs and alcohol. Um, night one, which we launched on the 17th of October, I made the case that there's over 110 different life controlling problems we can find ourselves within. We can be a workaholic. We can be addicted to our hobbies. We can be addicted to pornography, gambling, anger, depression, anxiety. And you wouldn't think those are addictions, but sometimes for some folks, it's easier just to kind of lament and focus on the negative than to realize that there are a lot of positives in life if we can reverse our, flip our script and reverse our inner monologue. And it's not always that easy because obviously, we can also be addicted to the pain of trauma and abuse and neglect, and we can kind of get stuck, I guess I would say, in perhaps victimization mentality. And while, there is just cause to say that people have been victimized. I've been victimized. We've all been victimized in maybe lighter degrees. But again, the church kind of teaches that if we can't forgive and we can't seek reconciliation and we can't, grieve, if we're just stuck, then transformation is going to seem like a million miles away, as we're, kind of in that broken record of like, you know, I can be an Eeyore myself, I can be like, thanks for noticing me, you know, and not focus on the glass being, half full. Uh, so this is something that even in the midst of, you know, these 60 plus folks that came out on our launch night, and the church only holds 100, by the way, 110, but I got pretty real with them day one. And I told them that while, alcohol and drugs are no longer on my punch card, I suffer from overeating. I suffer from, over entertaining myself. I suffer from anger. I suffer from depression occasionally. I suffer from, just things that maybe are a little more first world problems. But nobody's arrived, nobody's perfect, and we all have things that, we can work on. So I would say this next slide is actually a video, if we're able to play it, and it's one of the most inspiring to me as to how to basically look at the solution, if you want to call it, for helping people, particularly our loved ones who are caught up in addiction. So if we could play this.
Corey, for the sake of time today, we are going to have to skip the video, but it will go
Oh,
out to all attendees in our
okay,
newsletter that will follow up next week.
great. Okay. So let me just say that it talks about the fact that if we are disconnected and if we don't know our purpose, that we will essentially be prime targets to be isolated and addicted. And that they did numerous studies, both with people and with rats, during the Vietnam War to see what was the difference between the soldiers that came home and got loaded up on the same drugs as everyone else, but who came out of it okay and who, was released whilst actively addicted. And what they learned is that if have people you love to get up for in the morning, if you have a job that you love to wake up for in the morning, if you have, all these connections and just things to live for, because we do live for each other in a lot of ways, that you have a better chance of not, falling prey to addiction and just becoming lost from everything that you love. Because one thing I find about people that I counsel is if I reconnect them to what they were once passionate about, now they have something to fight for. Right now they have something inspiring to work toward, as opposed to just sobriety. Because the whole reason that people escape or self-medicate is because they don't want to deal with the reality of their situation, whether it's pain, whether it's struggles, whether it's, suffering. And maybe I'm biased, but the God that I follow, sent a suffering servant to show us how to suffer well, as opposed to feeling like all there is suffering and there's nothing, on the other side of it. So yeah, if you have some time, watch that video. It's not too long, but it's just something I use even with my students as I teach recovery classes and things still today. So again, Cheektowaga for me is the place where, my kind of worlds collided of just being, you know, struggling myself and not strong enough to help my cousin, who ultimately, came from a very broken home, a lot of baggage, background, issues. And I, hung out with him because of the freedom involved. And instead of being strong enough to be a hand up, I ended up kind of getting pulled into his world. And at some point, his choices became my choices. And, let alone that these townships have been ravaged by the opioid epidemic, and their landscapes have been forever changed unless we do something about it. So again, it's kind of full circle for me that my dad kind of told me that there are two paths. You can go down a hopeless path and a hope-filled path. And he passed away not too long ago due to Parkinson's and then complications from COVID. But his legacy remains. And now I'm the pastor who is, standing up for reuniting families in a Wesleyan church. And I just can't help but, think of him, think of my family, think of how far, God has brought me. So I just want to pass along to you all that this is now up and running every Friday night at 7 p.m. And again, this will be our third meeting, coincidentally on Halloween. So we're actually going to have a recovery comedy night, because on the fifth Fridays, I want to do something that's just pure fun. And I'm a big comedy fan. I think if we don't laugh, we'll, just cry more, especially in this day and age. So we're going to be offering that this Friday. If you want to bump to the next slide, this is where we're at 4600 Union Road. The church is set back a little, but we plant a big red flag out in front to let people know that we're there. And I'm just going to give you the layout because it varies a little bit each week, so that people kind of get a taste and see experience of what, a Sunday morning church could look like. Because again, we're like outpatient rehab for the soul. We're not trying to steal people out of Sunday morning churches. We're just trying to come alongside people. And every first Friday, we'll be teaching out the 12 steps. Will be that focus. And the second Fridays will be kind of more emoting, what it's like to be worshipful and to be mindful and, to help people in that capacity. The third Friday of the month will be, having people give their testimonies and baptisms should they request them. Also with a little message. And on the fourth Fridays, we'll be doing the breakout 12-step group and open share and all those good things after a little mini message and such. So again, just trying to mix it up a little because I don't know how much church background any of the folks will have, and just to encourage them that, you know, there are greater steps to take along the way. The last two slides would just depict how many people came out for our launch. Yeah, we covered that one. So the next one would just be, you know, so as to not have to sign consent forms, just a behind the back shot of some folks who were in attendance and, you know, helping to spread the word through AA groups and through their churches and through, you know, some of them work for, you know, various organizations as firefighters and ambulance drivers and all those great things. So the last slide would just be if we could circulate this in any way, shape, or form, invite people. Again, we're past the launch date, but you know, that little QR code will take you to our Facebook page, our website page, where we can, you know, connect with people that way. And again, like, I'm going to refer just as many people for y'all services, you know, through all the programs and support and resources that you have. And I just think that with this higher power component, you know, we can really represent all the angles and aspects of recovery and reducing harm out there and in our neighborhoods, because we just want to love on people and we just want to help them get unstuck and on their way to you know, a lighter path. So with that, I will conclude, and if we have time for questions, I can certainly entertain those. Otherwise, if you could just spread the word to anybody who'd be interested, that would be fantastic, because we'd love to see this grow, you know, to the point where maybe we got to plant another one. And I do have some interested parties down at the city mission or down at the CMDA headquarters in the medical corridor of UB. So that's on the horizon possibly as well. So
Thanks so much, Corey. We did just have one quick question while we transfer over to Jason getting his slides ready. I did share your resources that you shared with me in the chat for everybody, but if you could just briefly speak to how do people find recovery churches?
Yeah, so it's as easy as typing in recovery.church. That'll take you to a searchable engine through the national website. And when you pop in your zip code, it should, you know, our name should come up. And from there, the Facebook page information is available with the address and the times that we meet. Again, it's only on Friday nights at 7 p.m., 4600 Union. And again, that little promo piece, if people scan that, that'll basically take them right to the recovery.church national site. And again, we're hoping to connect through our Eastern Hills page too, but you know, Facebook and that website are the main two ways to connect with us right now. So
awesome. Thank you very much, Corey, for everything today.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.
All right. Lee, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. All right, everyone. So thank you very much, Corey. That's an incredible organization you have there, and some really great resources. Now we'll get into the overdose data updates for October 2025. And we've got some new stuff to show you guys this time around, which we're very excited about. All right, so we'll start with the overall picture of overdose deaths over the past decade or so. As we can see, in 2023 is when we saw our peak of overdose deaths at 436 fatal overdoses, with 366 of those being opioid related. In 2024, that came down significantly to 358 overall overdose deaths. And so far in 2025, as of October 24th, we have a total of 204 total deaths So it does look like we are on pace for another annual decline. If we continue at this rate, the total for the year will probably the total overdose deaths for the year will probably be somewhere around 250 or 260. Out of the 204 that we have so far, 152 are suspected overdose opioid related, 117 are confirmed opioid related, and 35 are waiting for toxicology but are presumed opioid related until demonstrated otherwise. And then we have another 53 overdose deaths that were confirmed to be non-opioid related. In terms of demographics, we'll take a step back and look at 2024. We can see that the Black population in Erie County is disproportionately affected by overdose deaths. The Black community is about 13% of the distribution of Erie County, but in 2024, they were about 1 in 3 overdose deaths. So a very significant overrepresentation by a factor of about 2.5. So definitely a significant disparity there. Looking at the most recent 12 months, so October 2024 to September 2025, we can see that the Black population is still disproportionately affected, but that disparity is starting to shrink. So it's now 23% of our overdose deaths in that time period were identified as Black, relative to 13% of the population. So we're starting to see that disparity close a little bit. This is that same race demographics as well as Hispanic ethnicity over time. These lines are population adjusted, and that allows us to better see disparities. So this shows which groups are more disproportionately affected. So the higher this line is, the more disproportionately that group is affected relative to their population. So the bigger the gap between these lines, the bigger the disparity is that we're looking at. So we can see that in mid-2024, which is that circled region, that's when the disparities were the largest. We saw the very peak of overdose deaths among the Black population adjusted. The overdose deaths among the Hispanic population had started to come down a little bit at that point, but were still very high. And we see that the disparities have started to close since then. That line there is August 2024. That's when we started to see these disparities begin to decrease quite rapidly. And it was a very nearly steady decline in both the Black and Hispanic populations to that point. Other demographics are not included here just due to limitations in data. We don't have enough data from those other groups to show them in this way. So that's the only reason why they're not included here. But we can see that racial disparity has started to close significantly. Year over year, in terms of population adjusted deaths, among Black overdose deaths, we've seen a 58% decrease, a 32% decrease among the Hispanic community, and a 24% decrease among white overdose deaths. So there still is a significant level of disparity there. But sorry, is this better? Yeah, so we can see that those disparities still have a long way to go, but they have come a long way from where we were at our peak in 2024. So this is that same population adjusted chart, but with age instead of race ethnicity. So the higher the line is on here, the more disproportionately the group is affected. So we can see here that the 40 to 49-year-old age group is currently the most disproportionately affected age group. Year over year, deaths have decreased among every age group. The largest decrease was in the 30 to 39 age group. And then we also saw significant decreases among those ages 50 and older. So that's the 50 to 59-year age group and the 60 and older age group. For a while in the previous year, we had been talking at the task force meeting about this concerning rise in overdose deaths among older adults, particularly those over 60. And we have seen that begin to decline precipitously, pretty significantly over the past year and really over the past 2 years. But that 40 to 49-year-old age group has not decreased nearly as much as the other ones. That really is our top age demographic that's being affected most significantly. It's 40 to 49. So now we'll talk about toxicology, which is the substances detected in overdose deaths. For these, toxicology data is available just through July of 2025 because there's we need a bit of time to get toxicology results back. So this is looking back at 2023, 2 years ago. And if you recall from our first slide, 2023 was the peak of deaths related to both opioids and cocaine. 2023, in 2023, 58% of overdose deaths were related to both opioids and cocaine. Another 24% were opioids without cocaine, and then 13% cocaine without opioids. So now we'll go to 2024, and we'll see that the picture shifts a bit. Now opioids and cocaine both is less than half of overdose deaths. So we started to see that decline in 2024. And now, with the most recent data available from August 2024 through July 2025, we can see it's decreased again somewhat significantly. 39% of overdose deaths in this time period were related to opioids and cocaine, 29% related to opioids without cocaine, and 22% cocaine without opioids. And that's a significant increase from where we were at in 2023, where only 13% of our overdose deaths were cocaine without opioids. So we're definitely seeing a pretty significant shift in the overall picture of substances being found among overdose deaths. So we can see side by side, looking at 2023 versus August 2024 through 2025, just how significant that difference is in that blue slice of both opioids and cocaine. Pretty significant shift there. So now we're going to look at these pie charts kind of stretched out over time. So this is the same thing, looking at toxicology, but if each pie chart is like a snapshot of a specific period of time, these lines show how each slice changes over time. So this box that we have here is looking at the same window as that pie chart for the most recent time period of August 2024 through July 2025. So we can see that while that pie chart is frozen in time of the percentages of the ratios of those different substances, we can see that during that time period, it's shifted rather significantly. And so by looking at these lines, we can see over time how each of these slices is changing. Each of these points is the average percentage in a 6-month window, and this allows us to see recent trends much more clearly. So hopefully that makes sense. So beginning in August 2024, we can see that's when the decline in deaths related to opioids and cocaine started to decrease really significantly. And that's also when we started to see an increase in deaths related to cocaine without opioids. So as one is decreasing, we see the other one increasing. And that's a trend that we started noticing right around August 2024. Very recently, though, in just the past few months, we have seen a recent uptick in deaths related to both opioids and cocaine, simultaneously with a decrease in deaths related to cocaine without opioids. So those lines do seem to trend in similar directions, opposite directions rather. As one goes up, one seems to be going down. So while we have seen opioids and cocaine decrease very significantly over the past year and a half, this is a rather significant rise in recent months. So we want to monitor that to see, is it going to fall back down to closer to 30% of overdose deaths, or is it hovering closer to 40, or is it going to keep rising back to levels we saw previously, which would be a very bad sign because that corresponded, the time periods where we had more overdose deaths related to both opioids and cocaine were also periods where we had more overdose deaths overall. So important to monitor that trend of what the drug supply is looking like among overdose deaths. So now we're going to look, this is a new thing that we're looking at now for the first time, toxicology trends by race categories. And this is because in that summer period of summer 2024 that we keep mentioning, there was a significant shift in the race stratified overdose death data. So in 2024, summer 2024, we saw this sudden shift, particularly among overdose deaths in the Black population. We saw a decrease in deaths related to fentanyl and cocaine, and an increase in deaths related to cocaine without fentanyl. And this corresponds with that same time period that we were talking about of where Black population adjusted deaths began to decrease rapidly in the middle of 2024. So we can see with that line there is dividing quarter 2 2024 from quarter 3 2024. So that's right around June of 2024. And we can see a very stark shift where we saw a jump in cocaine related without fentanyl and a drop in fentanyl and cocaine. So I think that's worth noteworthy there. This is showing just cocaine deaths in absence of fentanyl by race. The orange bars are among the white population overdose deaths, and the blue bars are among the black population overdose deaths. And we can see that where that shift occurs among cocaine-related deaths for black overdose deaths, but we don't see as stark of a shift among the white population. We see it maybe increase somewhat, but not as starkly or continuously. So this does seem to be a trend that is stratified by race to some degree. And once again, it occurred very abruptly in the middle of 2024. So this is looking at those that same data, but over time, and looking at other substance categories as well. So these are the same 4 substance categories that we were looking at previously. Fentanyl and cocaine present in the blue line, cocaine present without fentanyl in the pink line, yellow is fentanyl present without cocaine, and gray is everything else in the absence of fentanyl and cocaine. So in 2025, we see a decrease in deaths related to both fentanyl and cocaine, an increase in deaths related to cocaine without fentanyl. And critically, we now see more deaths among the black population related to cocaine without fentanyl than related to both cocaine and fentanyl. And that's a relatively recent flip that we see here. So the pink line is now higher than the blue line, indicating that cocaine in isolation is the largest category of overdose deaths among the black population. Among the white population, we can see that that's not the case. We did see a decrease in cocaine and fentanyl-related deaths, but it remains the largest category in the white demographic. Looking at overdose deaths by zip code, this is for the past 6 months, April 2025 through September 2025. We can see that the hardest hit area was zip code 14215 with 10 deaths. That was the east side of Buffalo, bordering Cheektowaga. So very significant number of deaths there. Next is 14201, which is the lower west side in the city of Buffalo. That was 7 deaths. West Seneca also had 7 deaths, which is a significant amount for that area, much more than we would expect. A couple areas on the east side, 14211, which is near Genesee Street, and 14212, which is near Broadway, each had 6 deaths. 14204, which is kind of closer to the city, near like Michigan Avenue, had 5 deaths. Black Rock Riverside, 14207, also had 5 deaths. And Hamburg had 6 deaths in the suburbs. So those are the areas that have been most affected in the past 6 months by overdose deaths, amid the climate of declining overdose deaths overall. And this is only showing zip codes that have at least 5 overdose deaths. So this is not all overdose deaths. This is just the ones, the areas that have been most significantly affected. So this is looking at the most recent 6 months by zip code compared with the previous 6 months. So October 2024 through March 2025 versus April 2025 through September 2025. So looking at this 6-month comparison, we can see the areas that have increasing overdose deaths are primarily the east side, so 14215, 14212, and 14204. Black Rock and Riverside saw an increase, and then in the suburbs, West Seneca and Hamburg also saw significant increases. A couple areas saw significant decreases, most notably South Buffalo, which is 2 zip codes, 14220 and 14210, as well as Tonawanda, also saw a significant decrease. Now we're going to look at a comparison to statewide trends in overdose deaths. The most recent statewide data available is through April 2025. So at that point in the year, New York State had seen a 37% decrease year over year in overdose deaths. And at that point, Erie County had seen a 29% decrease from an average of 36 deaths per month to an average of 25 deaths per month, averaged out over a year. We have data since then, which we will eventually compare to the state data when it becomes available. But over the past several months since April, our decline has continued. As discussed earlier, we are now down to an average of 21 deaths per month over the past 12 months, which amounts to a 38% decrease year over year. So we have caught up to and slightly exceeded the statewide trend. And it'll be interesting to see where the statewide trend ends up when we get that data in a few months. Another thing to note is that as of September 2025, we have been in continuous decline in terms of monthly average deaths every month since August 2024. So it's gone straight down from our peak near 35 deaths per month down to approaching 21 deaths per month. So definitely moving in the right direction and really encouraging signs there. Next, we'll talk about non-fatal overdose reports. And I know we're short on time, so I'm going to try and be brief. So the Office of Harm Reduction receives overdose reports daily from the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Office. They aggregate law enforcement reports and EMS calls, which we use for case follow-up after overdose and also for planning outreach. And it's important to remember that not all overdoses end up being reported. We know there's significant underreporting, as not often people will handle an overdose themselves, or a friend will take care of them, and they don't necessarily phone the police or other emergency services. So it's important to recall that this is not everything, and we'll get into a little more underreporting in a minute. We typically see 2 to 3 non-fatal reports per day. That's what those red lines on the graph represent. This is a chart of just how many reports we typically see in a given day. So lately we've been trending towards the higher end of that range, and it's important to consider that since overdose deaths are down pretty significantly, it's interesting to note that our non-fatal reports are remaining in that 2 to 3 reports per day range. We haven't really seen that drop significantly in proportion with overdose deaths. So that's worthwhile to note. In terms of sometimes at the scene of an overdose, the police will seize the sample of a particular substance and send it in for analysis by the Central Police Services Forensic Laboratory. There's a few particular contaminants that are of particular concern right now. Those are medetomidine, BTMPS, and xylazine. Xylazine and medetomidine are veterinary sedatives, specifically alpha-2 adrenergic agonists. For those who know what that means, because I'm not sure one of them. And then BTMPS, which is an industrial chemical with no known pharmaceutical use. So of the 79 samples that have been analyzed so far in 2025, 6 detected medetomidine, 3 of which were in July. So that's a relatively recent spike we saw there. We've seen 12 BTMPS detections, 3 of which were in June. And we also saw a spike of 4 of those in February, BTMPS. And we've seen 8 xylazine detections, 3 of which were in June. And we have seen no new detections of any of those substances since July 2025. So we'll see as more data comes in. Sometimes there's a lag between collection and analysis, what comes up for the rest of this year. But since July, we have not seen any new ones as of yet. But we definitely see medetomidine making its entrance into our drug supply here, which is going to be worth monitoring. In terms of non-fatal reports by zip code, areas with increased non-fatal reports include Lovejoy, which is 14206, which is just south of Broadway, near the east side. 14211 and 14215 on the east side. Also see increased reports. 14220 in South Buffalo. 14224 in West Seneca, and also 14141, which is in a rural area of Springville. Where we're seeing decreasing reports include Cheektowaga, Broadway, Hamburg, and Williamsville. So mostly suburbs, but also Broadway within the city of Buffalo, which is an area where we typically do see a lot of overdose activity. And then areas with a consistent amount of high reports are on the west side and Black Rock, which is 14201, the lower west side, 14213, which is Grant Ferry, and 14207, which is Black Rock Riverside. So those three areas are all in a continuous block on the west side into Black Rock. In terms of comparing where we're seeing non-fatals versus fatals, we typically see more non-fatal OD reports than OD deaths in a particular zip code. If we see more overdose deaths than non-fatal reports, that's a cause for concern because that's likely an indicator of potentially an indicator of underreporting. Since we typically get a particular ratio of non-fatal reports to fatal reports. If that ratio gets out of whack, then it might indicate that there's a lot of non-fatals that we're not hearing about. So which of those areas where we're seeing more deaths than expected? The east side predominantly, 14204, 14212, 211, and 215, and also West Seneca and Hamburg. And these are areas, once again, where we're seeing fewer non-fatal reports than we would expect given the number of overdose deaths. So that's all for our new data. If you are interested in overdose heat maps, which we have showed in the past, and you want to see where overdoses are occurring at a level that's more specific than the zip code level, please sign up for one of our data webinars. We can look at heat maps, you can ask questions, request specific maps, and sign up for monthly heat map updates once you sign and return an MOU indicating that you don't intend on distributing outside of your organization. So there's a QR code there, and as soon as I stop sharing, I will send this link in the chat if that's easier. But that's all we have, and we'll take any questions or comments if people are interested. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Jason. We do have one general question, and Jason, feel free to speak to this if you can. So does the health department have information regarding what may be impacting the shift of cocaine-related without fentanyl deaths? Does the health department think more people are testing their cocaine for fentanyl, so avoiding contaminated cocaine? Or is cocaine appearing to be more potent than in the past, or more likely to be contaminated with other drugs, not fentanyl?
So great question. It's yeah, great question. It's unclear as of right now. The fact that we do often see as that percentage of both opioids and cocaine changes, we often see one of the other lines change in direct proportion. So like let me pull up my slides again so I can show you what I'm talking about. Give you a short answer, we don't want to. It's hard to say what's actually causing something. Causality, it can be a difficult thing to pin down, but there is a lot of evidence suggesting that changes in the drug supply might be involved. So we can see we're back at the toxicology slides here, and we can see that for a while, as the line for both cocaine and opioids was increasing, the opioids only line was decreasing almost in exact proportion to that. So that in and of itself might indicate a change in drug supply, and that people were potentially co-using or expecting one drug and getting another, or there could have been contaminants involved. So that's worth noting. And then that recent uptick, we see the decrease in cocaine-only deaths increase in proportion to opioids and cocaine. So that that might be an indication of a drug supply change where we might be seeing various contaminants come in and out of the drug supply. But it's very difficult to know. We could theoretically look for other substances that might be contaminating or be co-used with cocaine that might be driving the increase in cocaine-only deaths. But in the past, that other substance would have been fentanyl, and so that's why we saw for quite a while both opioids and cocaine being detected in the period where we had the highest overdose deaths. That period was really high in 2023. Another thing to suggest that it might be a shift in the drug supply is this shift in toxicology by race. It may be that it's unlikely that the entire Black population changed their drug use habits, so abruptly like that. So it could be that this is an indication of a change in drug supply affecting different areas differently. So yeah, it's difficult to say, but it is noteworthy that the decrease in Black population adjusted deaths and the decrease in overall overdose deaths both correspond to this period where we see fentanyl and cocaine deaths in conjunction decreasing. So we'll continue to monitor this and see if we can pull out any other trends like this. But yeah, I'm just reluctant to say this is definitely why, but a lot of evidence seems to indicate a change in the drug supply. Sorry if that was too long-winded for you.
Oh, thank you for that answer, Jason. I haven't seen any other questions come through, so I think that we might be good to wrap up here.
All right.
Thank you,
Well,
everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Hopefully everyone got the QR code for the data webinar if you're interested.
And I'll
And we
send
look
all
forward-
that information out as well for folks.
Yeah,
Perfect.
and the link is in the
Look
chat.
forward to next month.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye.